in one of the latest attempts to explain that racism and anti-Semitism is bad, a few Jewish children went to talk to adults about the experience they had in school from other children. When they, talk about Auschwitz, talk about Hitler, throw pennies at them, and things like that. And the adults had some interesting comments about it. I don't know what's even more disturbing, the what is happening to children, what the sort of next generation of children is gonna be looking like when it comes to anti-Semitism, or the reaction of the adults themselves. Welcome to the reality show. Today we'll be watching this sort of like 7-minute supercut of this conversation that has happened between Jewish children and few adults. Uh, Joining me today are Marco and Richard. Marco, when you saw, we'll of course go through the video itself, the whole thing. I think we'll have time. But when you went through this video, anything that stood out?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, is the reaction of these people that they suddenly realize that anti-Semitism means being anti-something. It's like they never actually stopped and thought, What's this thing going on? It's just a weather event." No, it's actually people discriminating other people, humans discriminating other humans, because in this particular case, the kind of faith or place where they come from, which is racism, really. And Ayn Rand pointed out the fact that racism is the lowest form of collectivism. So when you are being racist to somebody, you leave your brain home and you start judging somebody because of the way they look, because of the way they behave. And it's quite staggering to me that in this day and age, racism in the form of anti-Semitism is so ripe. It's so in everybody's face, but it's also ignored because it's not necessarily about the color of the skin. Lots of Jewish people are white. I think 45% of Jewish people are white. So people tend to focus on the fact that they're white colonized bad people, ignoring the fact that half of them are black or brown or whatever. But again, color of the skin has got nothing to do with it. Here we have humans discriminating other humans, and in the end, if you had a society which doesn't look at groups, which doesn't favor a group over the other, i.e., favors individual rights, every single individual should have the same rights, then we would be on a level pegging. We wouldn't have this kind of issues where a group feels that it can overtake another group. But this is the result of the kind of world we're living in. I mean, it's not a given. We can change as things are. We can be more empathetic about other people. But the problem here is that as long as we live in this kind of mixed economy where the state favors one group against the other, where things happen according to a gang warfare sets of rule, where you have again a group that lobbies a state in order to get favors against another group. But we're never going to get out of this situation. I mean, it's disgraceful that in 2025 we're still talking about this kind of racism going on in our streets.
But I think the video that you're going to see clips of in a moment when we show it it shows American kids, school age kids, kids in their mid-teens, something like that, roughly. And I think one of the things that's quite telling about it is how rational these kids are, how clear-headed, how well they make their arguments, despite the audience that they're talking to and despite some of the comebacks from that audience. So although this is on one side an enraging video for some of the responses you're going to see, it's also encouraging in other aspects. And there's much to be commended about the maturity of these young people and the way in which they can express themselves and argue in a sensible, clear manner. So there's good stuff here too, which is why it's nice to be able to flag this up and use it as a demonstration of how younger minds can be far more sharp minds and intelligent minds and make very good arguments when it comes to the truth.
Uh, okay, now let's take a look at again, the whole video is about 7.5 minutes, so we'll stop throughout and comment on it. But let's watch the first part.
Into my class, throwing pennies at me.
And he said, I'm going to find out where you live and I'm going to blow up your house.
Took out a picture of Adolf Hitler, told me that her family would kill me,
Like, that's how the Holocaust started, having to hide.
Would you consider doing that?
hide my Judaism.
Yeah.
We invited 20 strangers to listen to personal stories of anti-Semitism and ask questions.
I was sitting in the cafeteria. Behind me, there were boys talking about this other student at my school who was Jewish. They said, this kid deserves to die and be put in an oven, just like Hitler did in the Holocaust.
In my class, we spent the majority of that unit talking about Israel-Palestine. I was asked to go to the board. They started booing. Initially, there were some shouts of Free Palestine, but the same person saying that started doing the Roman salute.
For like a few days in a row, graffiti started appearing in the bathroom stalls. A picture of Auschwitz with Kanye's album cover next to it saying Heil Hitler.
We were honoring the lives lost from anti-Semitism. There was nothing political attached to it. And multiple people came over and screamed, Free Palestine, all this stuff that was just extremely inappropriate to the setting that we were trying to have there.
A week after October 7th, a random man came up to me and said, I'm surprised you weren't killed by the Islamic Jihad. And he said, I'm going to find out where you live and I'm going to blow up your house.
It was an incredibly isolating experience to be standing there at the board for that long while people are shouting all these things. There wasn't anything I could really say or do in order to stop it.
My grandparents came here from Europe, from the concentration camps, and what's happening today is not what they came here for. I don't try to hide my Judaism.
Now we open.
Okay, so after this, they'll go into adults, but here we had a brief sort of just the kids talking about, when they were discussing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, when she tried to, go to the board and say something, people were like, I don't know why we call it Roman salute. It's like, it's a Hitler salute. That's what it should be referred to. Nobody, is like LARPing, is like a Roman, emperor when they do it. They are clearly like trying to sort of use the sign that the Nazis did, seeing anti-Semitic graffiti, random person coming up to you and saying, surprised you weren't killed by Islamic Jihad, overhearing that this kid deserved to die, deserved to go into oven, just like Hitler did. I mean, as somebody, and I'm not sure if we are a fan of this, as like a cis white male, I've never like experienced really the sort of this kind of like discrimination, something I don't have control over and just being attacked because of it. I, heard from, some of our friends who are not even Jewish, just, look like Jewish, that also received harassment. I mean, Marco, what, I don't know if you've ever experienced something like this, but how, I mean, imagine like being like a child, especially, just because you have and not even all of these kids have even like a yarmulke on or something like that, right? Just because, somebody associates you with some other group, you just get this immense amount of hatred coming after you. Again, there is absolutely no justification for it. There is no even there is nothing, right? This is not like I sometimes use the example of like 9/11, after 9/11, the sort of rise of anti-Muslim sentiments, which again is wrong. It's wrong to associate automatically every single individual of that group with that group. But at least in that way, you could see the sort of the rationale, right? It's people of this group do something bad, we go after this group. Still wrong, but the rationale. But it's Jewish people are trying to defend themselves in the state of Israel. And because of that, Jewish individuals in America are getting killed. Kids are getting harassed. The rise of anti-Semitic crime is insane, in like hundreds of percent year over year. Any thoughts on this, Marco, or the sort of individual stories they told?
Well, people are getting killed all over the world because of the war in Israel and Gaza. But the problem here is that we've accepted effectively this kind of ideas that a group determines what the individual is. So you have a bunch of knuckleheads out there who associate a person to a group, and then they ascribe all the characteristic or whatever happens linked to the group to that particular individual. As you said, just because somebody is Muslim, it doesn't mean he was involved in 9/11. Just because somebody is Muslim doesn't mean that they agree with what happened with October the 7th. Unfortunately, it happens that a big chunk of them actually do agree, but the issue is that it's an individual choice. It's the individual that is responsible for his own actions. And it doesn't matter if somebody belongs to a certain group, if somebody is the son of a miner, or minor, is the son of an aristocrat. It doesn't matter, because it's the individual's achievement, the way that the individual behaves, that has to be judged. It doesn't matter which group they come from. And this is the problem with the mentality of, the Hegelian Marxist view of people. They don't see individuals, they see groups. And the groups determine what the individual is. And ultimately, that is why they're quite happy to sacrifice the individual, because they're just a splinter of the group. They value the group, they don't value the individual. And lots of this problem come from this, that they don't see people, they see groups of people. They see a big blob that has a certain characteristic. And that's fundamentally the problem of these people. If they had a bit of brain, they would be able to discriminate. Hang on, a group is made of lots of individuals, but they don't do this because, well, their minds is drowned by the propaganda, Marxist propaganda, and all this kind of stuff. And that's why we are quite keen to point out that the individual is the unit here. The individual is the smallest minority, which is never protected like other minorities seem to be.
Yeah, and just to throw something a little bit more richer, because Marco mentioned if they had brain, but we are dealing with sort of a half-brain individual. We're talking about children, right? Like, this is what children are doing to other children, mid-teens, right?
Yeah. But children are thought by adults who should be, yeah.
Yeah, and this is what I'm going towards, right? Because this is not just some kind of, we're just being mean to this person for whatever reason, like the classic bullying. This is, we should do what Hitler did. Like, that needs a certain amount of understanding, or maybe just repeating what others have said, but certain amount of understanding of like what that means, right? Something like throwing pennies at them, that requires a certain like understanding. Okay, like what exactly? Like, this is like advanced anti-Semitism, right? It's like you know exactly what to do. It's the same like calling Israelis Nazis, right? You go for the exact thing that was done to the Jewish population at large, and you go for exactly that because that is the most destructive thing you can do. And the fact that we've already are seeing with the younger generation, the Gen Z, they are being increasingly more anti-Israel and anti-Semitic. And here we have sort of another generation. What is it, Gen Y or Gen Alpha is the next one that like bullies Jewish children.
Yeah, I mean, as you point out, kids have been mean to other kids since forever. That's not the point. The point here is the cultural references which they're drawing on, where they're getting those cultural references from, what they're taught, as Marco mentioned, and of course the wider environment in terms of what's become acceptable, in inverted commas, as a form of abuse. Or what's become typical as a form of abuse and a means of insulting and criticizing another person via means of their tribe or group. And of course, that's where the anti-Semitism comes in. And as you mentioned, the fact that you're talking about ovens, you're talking about Auschwitz names specifically. You're talking about the pennies and money as an anti-Semitic trope as well. All of that is in there because it's been fed to them, and they've lapped it up over time, not on one occasion, but repeatedly, in order for it to be the go-to response for these kids when they want to be mean to other kids. And of course it's singling out those kids for that kind of abuse, which is what's despicable here. And I think it's let's take the other side of this, the Free Palestine phrase. Now, obviously, on many shows we've talked about why the phrase itself is wrong and what it actually means in terms of from the river to the sea and all those kind of things, and also that it's free from what free from Hamas and all that. But here, that phrase is simply used as a means of shutting people down and making sure that they can't speak at all on any subject at all because of the tribe you say they belong to, or the tribe you only see them as belonging to. So it's literally a form of shouting them down, and that is something adults are doing all over the world, and they're doing it in all sorts of settings, from opera houses to the streets, to parliaments, and all kinds of settings. And those are the examples that these kids have picked up, and they're simply reflecting those examples in school. And of course, it should be stopped at that point. Otherwise, it'll only grow, become larger, become more normalized as time goes on.
Deborah, a member in the chat, says, rather than teach about the bogus Israeli-Palestinian conflict, schools should be teaching about the horrors of Islamic colonization that ethnically cleansed, enslaved, and oppressed. And I mean, I was surprised to hear that the schools were discussing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, I don't remember, like, in my school, like, learning about pretty much anything like relatively recent in my history classes. But even, if you want to like take the Israel-Palestinian conflict, which is pretty complicated, but also like taking it from like a morally neutral perspective, like what else would be discussed like that? Oh, let's discuss, World War II, but let's, just talk about, somebody supports this side, somebody supports this side. Let's do Tucker Carlson's class of analyzing World War II. I think, I don't know much about like how a proper children education should be set up, but sort of like acting as if there are two sides that are equal, that we can just discuss it without without moral context or without generally like broader context of what is happening. I mean, specifically about the Muslim conquest, since Slovakia was occupied by the Ottoman Empire for some time, we did discuss that. And we did discuss the kidnapping of children, for example, although even that was sort of like weirdly discussed in a bit like morally, almost like neutral perspective. The fact that like children were taken from like European countries into Ottoman Empire to be brought up, to be educated, and which is what, for example, Russia is doing in Ukraine right now. But Marco, any quick thoughts about sort of the fact that specifically Israeli-Palestinian conflict was taught or was spoken about, or even generally the sort of teaching of history?
Well, yeah, there's lots of history doesn't get taught. For example, the massive role that the Ottoman Empire had during the slave trade. They were providing black people to the slave auction. So but we don't talk about that because doing that, the people who push these kind of narratives would effectively talk against their own agenda. So they don't talk about these kind of issues. They're quite happy to have. I mean, the problem here is mainly that education is a government-led activity. Education is being left to the hand of the state, and of course, the state employs lots of political activists who are generally unsackable, and so that they do what they want. They thrash the curricula. They design the curricula in a way that allows them to push the activism. What they think is correct it has to be taught to the kids. The kids are taken to see, LGBT events, and they are taught how to design the various flags. They're taken to protest groups, all this kind of stuff. It's just mind-numbing. But they're not taught the actual facts. They're not taught history. They're not taught to be critical about what they're seeing, and all this effectively stunts their education, their development. We are creating a generation of kids who actually don't really know anything and don't really want to engage with anything, because everything which is beyond the trodden path to them is a dangerous thing to talk about. So they don't talk about controversial things. And if they do, they just stick to the accepted kind of thinking. They go for the average, which is not, which is just sitting on the fence, but they're going for what the majority tells you. And that's why you're going to hear lots of people saying, oh, the majority think that there is a genocide in Israel. So, yeah, it's safe to say there is a genocide. It's just, and that's why the propaganda and the social media stuff is so effective in pushing the agenda of the Islamists, really. And these kids are totally left as pure victims for this kind of stuff. Yeah, the problem again is the statism and the fact that education is monopolized by governments, really.
And certainly here in the UK, Daniel, I mean, I can't speak for the Eastern Bloc, but I get the impression from talking to you about some of the stuff that it's much more conventional in terms of its teaching, or at least it was. Whereas here, education has been dominated by activist teachers who want to shape those kids' minds in order to change the world in accordance with those teachers' own politics. That is the driving attitude. I mean, they certainly hold within primary schools for like 10-year-olds, they hold like UN days where they hold sessions among the 10-year-old kids where each is representing a different country. And the aim of the session is to talk about how everybody should always compromise with each other, regardless of which flag you're sitting behind. Of course, nobody wants to sit behind Israel in that kind of setting for the reasons that these kids are pointing out here. And the bullying that and anti-Semitism that springs from it, but they're being taught always in terms of that issue of compromise, that issue of moral relativism, and the fact that every nation, regardless of every ideology, sits on equal footing, is of equal value to the world, and therefore should be given equal airtime and equal, moral standing. And of course, that's completely abhorrent if you look at what some of those ideologies actually stand upon.
Yeah, and when it comes to, and again, there are probably much better people to talk about how sort of children's education should work. But at least I think the worst part is not even sort of not being taught facts, but sort of everything is being taught out of context. I mean, I remember, my favorite times in school is whenever a map was brought up, because nobody could connect anything to anything. Every event was separate from I remember an example of we were being taught about the Frankish Empire, the sort of Western, Middle, and Eastern Frankish Empire, and somebody, the teacher asked which empire was bordering sort of like the I think at that time it was the Moravian Empire, or basically what is today Slovakia. And the fact that nobody could nobody could orient themselves because they had no understanding of how the map looks. I remember somebody couldn't even find Africa on the map, and that is the kind of thing. It's not even about not knowing the specific fact. It's just being so out of place of not having any understanding or contextual knowledge of anything, and that is the most important part, right? It's you can be taught facts about when something happened, but if you cannot connect it to the general overview of human history, then it's just a factoid. It's not knowledge.
Well, that's what they're doing. It's not an accident that history has actually been atomized to this event, to this degree. You are taught events totally disconnected from each other. And so you learn about, Nazi Germany, you learn about slaves in the south of the United States before the Civil War. But these things are always disconnected. There's no an overarching principle. There's no ultimate lesson to learn from the facts of history, and that's part of the problem. That's why things after less than 100 years are repeating themselves, nearly verbatim. It's terrible. It's really, really frightening.
Let's take a look at what adults are saying to these Jewish children.
The floor to questions.
Would you consider doing that so these things would be preventable?
What, hide my Judaism?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have to sometimes, which is crazy, the state of affairs we're in. If you think about it, that I have to hide my religion because I'm scared of being attacked or harassed. I mean, I do have to. Like, I came to New York City just like last week, and my mom said, you have to wear a baseball hat over you, and you have to take off the necklace.
Imagine being black. Like, these are some things that are happening to you guys, but like, there's so much more. You're getting personally hated on for your religion, but we're getting hated on for just the color of our skin. So remember, there's other people that are much more oppressed than you.
One group's experience doesn't take away from another.
It's much easier to hide that you're Jewish than to hide your race. Even if you could hide your race, would you want to? Of course not. So when you say that maybe we should hide it, obviously nobody wants to hide something that's a real part of their identity. Sometimes we've had to take our yarmulkes off. It's not like something that we want to do. We're proud of being Jewish the way you're proud of being an African American, the way somebody might be proud of their gender identity or their sexual identity. People are proud of that. They don't want to have to hide it because that's a sign of an oppressive society.
The ability to
Yeah, again, the fact that that kid had to tell her even the way the woman she presented it, right? You know, don't you think this could have been prevented? This is preventable if you simply hide that you're being Jewish. And you know, I don't know the motivation for like asking such question, but you know, that is not something that like should be preventable, or that you know, you should want to actively work on preventing. The problem is the crime or the violence that is coming from there, right? It's yeah, you know, you can put yourself in a position that is more dangerous if you go into some kind of like bad you know, bad part of town or something. Yeah, you're putting yourselves in a dangerous position, but the solution is not just don't go there or don't do this. The solution should be, okay, let's deal with the actual root cause of the problem. And yeah, even the sort of the idea of coming out, well, you don't know, imagine being black and being hated for the color of your skin. I don't know why would anybody even like bring that stuff up. Like yeah, when somebody is talking about, you know, certain kind of racism, does that erase like other kind of racism? Like I cannot even think in that like oppressive mentality, and meaning like thinking like every single interaction is like about oppression, and every single thing that happens is because somebody is being oppressed. Marco?
And that's part of the problem. The part of the problem most of the problem, in fact, is that here in the West, we do not stand up for our own culture. The West has a tradition of liberalism. You know, we are tolerant about different religions, different races. Of course, yes, we had our issues in the past, but they are in the past. The whole point that we learn from the past, we recognize our mistakes, and moved on. We create a society where anyone can be free, anyone can contribute happily, anyone can be left alone, because we learn from the stupid thing we did in the past. But these people who think that anti-Semitism is acceptable, they're effectively constantly blaming the victims. Imagine, I mean, it would be totally unacceptable for somebody to say, oh, it's the girl's fault if she got raped because she's too beautiful, she dressed too smartly. It's like, who in the right mind would actually say something like that? But when it comes to the Jews, that's an acceptable position to take. Well, it's their fault because they look too Jewish. It's their fault because they're carrying the symbols of their religion. Well, there are people in our society that make a show of their own religion in the way they dress, in the way they fashion their facial hair, and they're not very shy about saying what religion they come from, and they are accepted. But the Jews, nah, that we don't like that. They don't belong to our group, and there is this kind of sense that this kind of oppression Olympics, where the person more oppressed is always at the top of the food chain, the top of the pile in terms of receiving all sorts of support. And so the Jews are seen as, well, they tend to be fairly successful, so they do not deserve any kind of empathy, or even, they don't even deserve to be treated like human beings. But the other group, they come from a country where they actually don't make much of themselves. They don't even give any importance to education or any importance to human rights, any importance to anything at all. But we must tolerate them because they're different. No. If they're different and their culture is inferior in terms that they support stuff which is no longer acceptable, because after centuries we realize that the way they behave is not acceptable, well, they have to change or they have to leave. It's not a matter of compromise. If somebody comes from a culture which is racially, it's a racist culture, well, they have to change their views. We do not accept this kind of stuff. And again, as you mentioned, when we find this kind of racism really sad, well, we should challenge it. We should stamp it out instead of always find an excuse for the perpetrators if they come from the right group.
Yeah, I think what this woman says here essentially is, why don't you compromise? You're the victim of this abuse, but can't you do something about it? Can't you compromise? And that is exactly what Ayn Rand talked about in The Sanction of the Victim. She talked about the fact that the victim of bullying is always asked to compromise with the bully, and therefore give them the sanction to continue bullying them by doing so. And in many ways, she's talking about business and the business world, but she's also talking about this kind of thing as well. And it's quite clear that that's what this woman is asking for, and is appalled at the fact that they're not prepared to do that when clearly that's something that, as the kids point out in such an eloquent manner, that one group's experience doesn't take away from another. And that this is a sign of an oppressive society if you're being forced to hide any aspect of you for which you should be either indifferent or proud. There's no reason why you should have to hide any of that. So and those are clear, intelligent arguments made by the kids in such a measured way that I think that's truly commendable. And the fact that they're having to tackle what it feels like the two sides have been reversed. It feels like the kids are sitting down and it's the adults at the front of the class. Because frankly, on the basis of what they say and how well they argue, that is the case.
Yeah, and so Deborah in the chat says, my Jewish daughter is married to a black man. She is the victim of much more bigotry than he is. And, I don't want to take away fully the sort of, because, the Jim Crow, if we go back, that's, if you are African American, that might still be like your grandma, right? You might still sort of feel the some of the injustice coming in from that. But again, we are talking about America when sort of a black man gets unjustly killed or murdered by a police officers. You have a whole nation goes on a protest for it, right? Because it shouldn't have happened. When something like, we even have examples of police officers properly, I think, defending themselves and in the process killing a black individual because something improper they did, and even that gets a protest. So the idea that sort of black racism doesn't get enough attention or doesn't get enough care in America, I think is frankly ridiculous. But look at the anti-Jewish crimes. Was there any when the Jewish couple was killed in Washington, D.C., was there anything happening there? When the pro-Palestinians went to protest in front of a synagogue in New York City, was there any sort of big backlash there? On the other side, you have Jewish individuals joining the pro-Palestinian side to protest against the state of Israel. So, but again, this is not like a competition that we should only care for whoever is actually being more proportionally targeted. Any type of racism, any type, and America is a big nation, or every nation, every government is big enough, to tackle many kinds of bigotry, not just focus on one.
Yeah, you're totally right there. I mean, we should stress the fact that anyone who's subjected to any kind of abuse, any kind of discrimination, well, is a victim of that, and no one should be doing this. No one should be on the receiving end of this kind of abuse, because it's a breach of the human right. Every single individual has the right to live their life as they prefer. They can choose whatever religion. They can choose not to have a religion. That they should be free to do whatever is right in their life, and no one has the right to interfere with their choices. And this is exactly what we do not guarantee. This is exactly what our governments, our society, geared up to create groups against groups, is failing to do. If every single individual were treated the same in front of the law, then we could apprehend the individual that breaks the law. But as long as we think of groups, competing groups clashing in their interest, and trying and overrun each other in gaining the favor of the legislator, or gaining the favor of the institution that gives them money, well, we're never going to get out of it. And the whole point, as Ayn Rand pointed out, is the primacy of individual right in a society. Every individual needs to be free to live their own life, and no one has the right to force them to do otherwise. And that's the role of government, to take away the use of force between individuals. But people do not understand this, do not want to understand this, because, of course, if you did that, if you gave freedom to every single individual, there wouldn't be an elite of people ruling other people. You wouldn't have the socialist elite that tells the workers how to behave. You wouldn't have the aristocracy telling the minions what to do. You wouldn't have, the kind of political power that we've seen wielded today by our politicians.
But of course, don't let's confuse this. Don't let's equivocate over what we're saying here, because Rand also point out, judge and be prepared to be judged. But that's on the basis of your actions, on the basis of the choices you make, the decisions you take. Those absolutely should be judged, but you shouldn't be judged according to some tribal membership or some immutable factors that relate to that you haven't chosen. For example, skin color or whatever. I mean, that's quite clear that the two are not incompatible. They're absolutely compatible, and they're absolutely essential if you want any form of justice in society, or any form of justice for any human at all. And I think, but this idea that you should line people up in an order of the most oppressed at one end, the least oppressed at the other end, and only concentrate on the three at the most oppressed end and focus only on that and ignore all of the principle that applies right the way down the line is to totally miss the point, and is a reason why oppression will continue so long as you don't understand that. And it's oppression by whom, on what basis, to whom, or based on what ideology, and those are the actions, the choices we're talking about when it comes to judge and be prepared to be judged.
Yeah, and somebody said being black is hardly even a trouble at this point. And again, that's hard for somebody to, for somebody else to say. Although on the other hand, because I'm speaking as somebody who, like, at 19, I was like traveling around the world to conferences, like everything like done by me, and I'm talking as a white man, right? But then on the other hand, we have an example of Ayn Rand, who at 19, she, I think it was at 19 or around that age, she went from Soviet Union to America, barely speaking English, and was able to like establish herself in Hollywood. And when she, at some point was asked on a stage, like, how is I can't remember it exactly. Maybe you guys remember about sort of, it's hard to, maybe there is discrimination against women or something like that. And she just like, would she, always be able to stand up despite, having some disadvantages? And she's like, well, I'm here, or something like that. I can't remember it exactly. So yeah, maybe, when you're thinking in groups, there might be sort of, groups that are being more oppressed, but when you are on individual level, none of that matters, right? It's if your life sucks, does it matter if it's because of you can do something or because somebody else's? At the end of the day, the only actions you can control are your own, and put forward whatever you can. So yeah, so much about that. More?
Sure.
Hide is a privilege in itself. It shows an assimilation into whiteness. There is a privilege associated with that as well.
Of course, for white Jews, that is the case.
For sure.
51% of the Jewish population is not white, just to put that out there.
Have you guys ever experienced actual violence?
I have been in that situation. I was on the school bus, a bunch of older kids, they were walking back and forth on the bus saying, raise your hand if you're Jewish, we're gonna finish Hitler's job. My best friend at the time, she pointed towards me. Then they grabbed my shirt. At that point, we were already at the stop, so nothing happened. And then afterwards for a while, they were drawing swastikas on my notebook. So yeah, this stuff does happen, but it's not very known or spoken about.
Someone did throw a milk carton at me, and there would have been other things if at that moment a teacher didn't walk into the cafeteria and the kids stopped, no one said anything.
I've received threats. Someone spat on my car and said anti-Semitic things.
Do you think there are people out there who can say free Palestine yet not necessarily be anti-Semitic?
I think it depends on the environment, 100%.
The implication of saying free Palestine to people that are mourning Jews being murdered by happens to be Palestinian terrorists, do you see how that looks like it's coming from a place of hatred and not actual care about the Palestinian people? Because it wasn't a setting in which people were discussing Israeli government policies, Israel war. It was just in that setting, it had nothing to do with politics, and they decided to come and provoke people who were mourning.
Is there room?
So here we have a bit more. We had the first person, talking about you can assimilate into whiteness, you can pass as white, which again, this immense focus on sort of the color of one's skin. Somebody asked, have you experienced actual violence? Which I'm not sure if that was meant to sort of degrade the experience, as if, simply threats of violence are not enough, or if it was a genuine question of how far does it go? But again, even I brought this example a couple of times from when I was in my in high school, and we were it was something I think it was social studies or something like that, and we were talking about discrimination, and there was a poll in the class about who would you be comfortable living next to, and more people would be comfortable living next to gypsies, which if you are from Europe you might understand the sort of the scale of what it means. More comfortable people were comfortable with living next to gypsies than living next to Jewish individuals. I think it was 2 people in the class of 30 were okay living next to Jewish individuals. So, and I've never before, or almost never before, even heard anybody talk about, Judaism or Jewish people or anti-Semitism. Yet there is this unique sort of hatred. And again, we are talking about the city that used to be 50% Jewish. So, what was the last thing was about free Palestine, and if it's not being anti-Semitic. And anytime we hear about it, it's hard to separate it from it. I mean, again, the kid brought up an example of it was a funeral or some event that was mourning Jewish individuals killed by Palestinian terrorists, and somebody else free Palestine. The Elias Rodriguez, the guy who killed the Jewish couple in Washington, D.C., he was yelling free Palestine when he did that. Was that an example of, this is not anti-Semitic? Marco?
Well, that's a stupid question in the first place. It's like going to a black person using the N-word and claiming, well, I'm not being racist. Well, you are actually. But part of this comes from the ignorance of these kids and the people who use these words, who don't actually understand the context, as you pointed out earlier on. You cannot just use a phrase and expect it not to be interpreted in the proper context by people who actually know what the context is. So we've seen the video of the stupid old woman who chants from the river to the sea, just because it's a kind of rhymey thing, but she doesn't know what river or sea. She doesn't really know what he's talking about, and she's being anti-Semitic because she's effectively saying destruction of Israel, with a implied killing of every Jew. So that's pretty anti-Semitic, isn't it? But also we heard the kind of word salad that these idiots use when they talk about racial issues and stuff like that. I mean, all the stuff that's been pushed out from the 2020s with the George Floyd riots and the BLM, which, by the way, it's a Marxist organization which does exactly what Marxists do. See people as splinters of a group, not as an individual. But the scandal ideology has spread like a wildfire, often with fires that are lit by rioters. So we see effectively the apex of we are reaping what we've been sowing for the last 10, 20 years. And by Jimbo, that it's really ugly. It's really we pushed our society back to effectively the 1930s because we decided to be tolerant of every single culture, even if they are repellent cultures. This is stupid. This is negating everything we've achieved so far, going against our values, sacrificing our values for the sake of some savage culture that decides not to civilize itself. So, and that is wrong because people are paying for the mistakes that we are making. People are, especially these kids, is dreadful that they have to experience this kind of stuff. It's dreadful that a black kid might be racially abused because that's just something that belongs to a different century. But still, we allow it to carry on. That shouldn't happen at all.
The fact that's brought up here that by one of the kids that Jewish people are not majority white is a fact, but it's not an argument. I mean, it's relevant for them to bring it up, certainly in terms of shutting down the stupid point that the guy in the audience is making. But it's not an argument of itself because it's falling into the same trap now. So I'm not here to criticize the kids for what they're doing here because they're making such a good stand of it. But again, the color of the skin is utterly irrelevant, and it's this assimilated into that is the scariest part of that phrase. Not even the whiteness or even the thinking of people in terms of color, but thinking of people in terms of drops of liquid and the bucket of liquid being what's important, you're just being dropped into it and then diluted into it, or some such metaphor. Because the fact is, you're coming back to the fact that people only see things in terms of these groups, and not in terms of the individual. And as soon as you wipe out the individual, you wipe out the self, you wipe out anyone's mind, their capability of forming their own life, making their own decisions. You're rendering them fodder for the group. And as soon as you get fodder for the group, then you're in a messy place, which is going to end up with slaughter ultimately, which is what it's done every time, including in the case of the Jews, of course, in the Holocaust and October the 7th. But yeah, it's and the actual violence question, as you say, I don't because of the way this is edited, I don't know whether that's a genuine question or it's yeah, I know you're talking about a lot of words being thrown at you, but were you actually the subject of physical violence? And of course, I think one of the things that's interesting here and about how these kids respond is that they are giving accurate accounts and there don't seem to be any attempt to exaggerate them into something they're not. They seem to be very focused on the actual events, the extent to which they were a problem, the extent to which they could have been worse but weren't, and they're making those things quite clear in the description of it. So there's no sense that they're appealing to emotion or truffling for sympathy. They're simply telling you what you don't know is going on because you've chosen to cover your eyes, cover your ears, and pretend it doesn't happen because you know that you are, in some way, by not speaking out, by not challenging it, by accepting the premises on which it's based, you're part of ensuring that it's able to occur in any setting, including in schools.
So we've only covered about half of the video actually, but the biggest parts were in the beginning part, and we have to start wrapping up. So I'll go to you, Marco, first. Maybe if you remember anything from the rest of it, if there was anything important to bring up, and if not, any other last words, and where can people find you?
Yeah, no, I think we covered most of the video. It's a sequence of stories that these kids are bringing out to show how they've been suffering anti-Semitism, or how certain actions consist of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic statements and events. But what really gets to me is that, a few years ago, everybody went to the cinema to watch Schindler's List, and they come out crying and, all sorry, it's terrible events. And then when these things happen again on our streets now, we seem to find no words to describe it. We seem to be able to turn away from it, and this is the thing that we have to try and turn around. We see how the people, the Marxists, the Hegelian ideas are affecting human being by dehumanizing individuals, by rendering them as piece of a wider group. You effectively deny their identity, deny their rights, and deny their freedom. So you're effectively pushing a system which doesn't see individuals as valuable. Every single life counts. And that's why capitalism is the only moral system which, at its core, recognizes the individual as a precious, precious thing. Every single life is important, and every single life should be maintained and protected. And that's why the massive difference between these fascist or socialist or theocratic systems we see are not looking after individuals, they're looking after the group, and therefore creating a little elite of rulers who who rule over the single individual. Capitalism is the only system that requires the individual to be free. That's why we're pushing for it, because we're pushing for love of life and love of freedom.
I think the end of the video tends to focus on the fact that the crowd, the adults are sitting down, expressing the fact they weren't aware of all this going on. They didn't realize it was at that extent. They were impressed by the kids, and they want to know in many ways, how they can help. And that kind of stuff. So it's quite a positive end for the bulk of the audience there. I'm not sure everybody, including some of those that we've focused on so far, have had their minds changed. I think they left as bigoted as they came into that room, most likely. But it's nevertheless that within the wider setting of those 20 strangers, there's clearly a good response to what they've learned during that particular session. So I think that's worth commenting on. It seems to be. I had a chance to check out. We checked out one of the other videos on it, and there's another video. I think it's maybe the second one on this channel, where a Jewish Arab Zionist speaks to sits behind a table and says, "Ask me a question," and has a long conversation with somebody who comes up to him and asks him a question. And that's a really good one to check out as well for showing the debate that goes on, and the way in which, when challenged, when people are really asked to express what their thinking is based upon, or whether there's any thinking behind what they're saying, as opposed to emotionalism, then their argument begins to fall down. Then they start to see the cracks in it. Then they realize that, okay, I didn't actually understand what a Zionist was, what it really means, or the extent to which Jews and Arabs are already living together in Israel. And all of those kind of things, which is based on a lack of knowledge, but an adamancy of a position taken despite that lack of knowledge. So that's a good video to check out, certainly. But it seems to be a good way of bringing clearly to the fore the core issues and principles at play, and making good videos in the course of it.
Yeah, I'll put their channel in the description. They're called Street Smart YouTube, and they seem to mostly do sort of like the on the street sort of prove me wrong or change my mind or that kind of thing. So this came out of there. With that, where can people find you? Did you say?
Do check out the Briefly Objective. The links in the description below for short form material based on a lot of the conversations we've taken place on this channel. So check it out.
And you can find me on my YouTube channel, Damn Dan. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of The Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye-bye.
Bye.